Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. This is Daniel Estulin, and welcome to Estulin.media. Today, our guest is my friend, Dennis Small. He's a Latin American editor of Executive Intelligence Review. That's a weekly magazine founded by American statesman and economist Lyndon LaRouche, and he's joining us from the United States. Dennis, thanks so much for joining us. Now, you're really busy, but thanks for your time.
No, I'm more than happy to join you to discuss what's going on in the world.
You know, I'm going to jump around a bit in this interview because you're one of the very few people out there who can actually build this whole image out of seemingly disjointed pieces of the puzzle. So let me ask you this overall picture. Conflicts the world over. We have Gaza, we have Israel, we have Palestine, we have the Houthis, we have Syria being bombarded, we have Iran, we have Iraq, we have Ukraine, we have all the Central Asian former Soviet Republic, the perimeter. There's a plan there to put that in play against the Russians. You have China and Taiwan, and then you have Africa, of course, and you have Central America, you have South America, so much is going on there with Milei and company. So what's the common denominator for all of this globally?
Well, the common denominator is the figure 2.1 quadrillion. And that is the approximate amount of international derivatives in existence, financial aggregates over and all. We've discussed on a number of occasions, I've frequently referred to 2 quadrillion, approaching that number. Our best estimate at this point is that the total amount has now broken the 2 quadrillion number. Not that that makes a whole difference in itself, because it's completely unpayable. But what's going on is that the rate of increase of the financial speculative bubble has zoomed upwards. Not the total amount, that has grown, of course, but the rate of increase is growing. This is according to the official statistics of the Bank for International Settlements in Basel. Their numbers up through June 2023, which are the latest numbers available, the rate of increase year on year of derivatives is about 13%. It's been 10 years or so since it's grown at that rate, but it's more than likely in the quarter or the semester since then, i.e. the second half of 2023, which we don't have the numbers on yet, that the rate of increase has zoomed back up to the rate of 30-40% a year that it was in 2007, 2008, which led to the blowout. The reason for that is because the Treasury market itself has become the subject of hedge fund speculation. And there's been reports on this in the financial media. So the common denominator of all of these crises around the world is that you have a global financial system based in London and Wall Street, which is blowing out. And they are desperate, A, to impose conditions to try to keep their bubble afloat, and B, make sure nobody else comes in with an alternative, which, of course, the Chinese and the BRICS and the Belt and Road Initiative are doing. So all of these hotspots that you see around the world, from just a couple of years ago, the war triggered in Ukraine by NATO's expansion eastward against Russia, war number one. Number two, the Gaza war, which was a response supposedly by Israel, backed by the United States and London, to a very questionable attack on October 7th by Hamas. We can get to that, I'm sure we will later. But now, as of the last 48 hours, we have escalating American attacks against supposedly Iranian-backed militias, and they may well be, in Iraqi territory and in Syria, because they had attacked American troops in Iraq and Syria and so on. One step back, what are American troops doing there? Syria didn't invite American troops in there. What are they doing there? They're sitting ducks. The Iraqis want the U.S. out. They're there, they're sitting ducks. So we now have 3 different wars underway, all of which are pointing in the direction of a big head-on confrontation between the United States and NATO on the one side, and Russia and China on the other side. That's the big picture. It's scary, but that's what it is.
You know, a few days ago, no, it's been, I think at the end of last week in November, if I'm not mistaken, 2023, time flies. Joe Biden stated that the old world order is dysfunctional and there's this urgent need to create new world order. And he expressed confidence that the United States can become this what he said, locomotive of change and the builder of that new world order. What does this new order consist of? And how is this new order different from the famous George H.W. Bush's New World Order back in 89 or 1991? 1991, I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, what you have is a ruling establishment that's making things up as they go. I mean, they've got a really big problem, which is, on the one hand, their system is blowing apart. Excuse me. There's not much they can do about that. There's no way of keeping a speculative bubble of that size afloat, no matter how much you loot, no matter how many wars you start, no matter if you channel about $1 trillion in the US defense budget per year. It's not quite $1 trillion yet. It's just shy of 900 billion. But even the Inspector General and others in the Defense Department are saying it's going towards $1 trillion soon. That's channeled to the largest defense contractors, but Lockheed Martin and Boeing and these guys, they're actually run by Wall Street. They're run by the same large investment companies. BlackRock is the largest investor, State Street Corporation. It's not no longer a military industrial complex. It's a military financial complex. So your tax dollars, my tax dollars, I'm an American citizen, are going through the Pentagon budget to these defense firms, to Wall Street, to try to keep an unsustainable bubble afloat. So on the one hand, they have this problem, which is their thing is blowing apart. The other problem that they have, if they look in the other direction, which they do, is you have an emerging global majority coming together around the BRICS, which has now grown as of January 1st, 2024, as you know, from 5 members to 10, with another 20 or 30 asking for membership. And you have the actual locomotive of change economically, China, moving very rapidly in all areas, infrastructure, science and technology, in all areas. So this financial establishment has got a problem. They've got a double problem. So their best hope, and this is the game plan coming out of those who are calling for a complete unipolar world, is to play a nuclear chicken game with Russia and China to try to back them down with all of the attendant dangers of a chicken game with nuclear weapons, to get them to back down, crack them somehow or other, and at the same time impose on the entire global South levels of looting which require political and military dictatorships of the sort that would make the Pinochet regime blush in embarrassment. That's the name of the game, and that is what the one world order is. That has consequences, as your question implies, and is the case, culturally, socially, in all regards. They have to try to turn thinking, creative human beings into automatons or into cattle, a herd of cattle who are like serfs that is culled periodically through population warfares to reduce the population. And that's the name of the game.
You know, you mentioned India, China, and the BRICS. Now, are India and China the future, not only of BRICS, but also of the post-globalist world?
Well, the big question here, and I'll jump in with all 4 feet. The big question is, how do you replace a unipolar world? The talk of the town, of course, is you need a multipolar world. You need to have different centers of power, enough to counterbalance each other. And that's what many people, including in Russia and China and India and in the global South, talk about. The problem with the very concept of a multipolar world is that it includes in it the germ of British geopolitics. The unstated axiomatic principle is that each of the poles, in fact, have a different interest, and they simply need to be counterbalanced in a fair way. The view of Lyndon LaRouche, the view of the Schiller Institute, the view of Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who founded the Schiller Institute, is that it is possible and necessary to create an entirely new paradigm, a new security and development architecture, where it is not a multipolar world, it's certainly not a unipolar world, but it is the kind of transformation where the interests of the one humanity, of us as a species, takes precedence and priority over what are perceived as local or even national or regional interests. Now, there are precedents for this. This is not something that we made up out of thin air. It is the basis for the way humanity got out of the Middle Ages and into the Renaissance. This is the concept of Nicholas of Cusa, where he talks about the coincidentio oppositorium, the coincidence of opposites. How do you take two positions that seem to be irreconcilable and actually come up with a higher level solution to the problem, not a balancing out of their self-perceived local interests. It's not I scratch your back, you scratch mine, but it's an actual solution at a higher level to what are those perceived interests. That's how we got the Golden Renaissance. Similarly with what happened with the Peace of Westphalia. You had Catholics and Protestants killing each other at a rate which was going to leave all of Europe depopulated, until finally at a certain point, both sides realized we can't do this because the winner will not exist either. So the idea of the Treaty of Westphalia is completely different than what was there earlier. It's the idea of the benefit of the other. It's the idea of letting bygones be bygones, of moving forward to develop a system in which your development is what is in my personal self-interest. Now, many people today will poo-poo that and say, oh, come on, get serious. Everyone knows that we're all just egotistical. And that simply betrays the lack of education and the foolishness of the people who are stating that, because that is not human nature. That is, quote unquote, human nature under conditions of a hedonistic Hobbesian world of a war of each against all, of the law of the jungle, of a zero-sum game. But the nature of man, and this is something that Helga Zepp-LaRouche recently stated explicitly, 10 principles which she put forward for the basis of such a new system, is that man's nature is essentially good, not in a Pollyanna way, but is good because we are endowed with creativity and we can therefore act for the good of the other as well as ourselves. And all evil is the result of lack of development, which means that it can be defeated in exactly that fashion. So I think that what we're looking at is the possibility of a change, but it's got to be big or it isn't going to happen. You cannot do this piecemeal. You cannot do this like a little brick wall which you build up. You have to have the kind of change which brought mankind into the Renaissance out of the Middle Ages. That's the only solution to this crisis.
One of the key globalist meetings that just ended a couple of weeks ago is the Davos World Economic Forum. Well, they talk about the usual depopulation agenda, green agenda, ecology, so on and so forth, the artificial intelligence. So now I want to ask you, what is the alternative? Because Schwab and company, they have their idea of how they want their world to be constructed. But what is our alternative to Schwab's ideas?